Imagine for a moment what your life could look like 6 months from now if you actually stuck to the intentions you set this year, instead of fading out by February like most people do. Picture waking up each morning with clarity, energy that doesn't collapse by midday, peace instead of anxiety, confidence instead of self-doubt, and physical health that supports your goals rather than holding you back. Imagine looking back over the past 6 months and feeling proud of the consistency you built, routines that help you sleep better, move better, think better, and live better, instead of feeling frustrated that you tried again and failed again. Hold that image in your mind for just a moment. What does that future you look like physically? What does your day look like from start to finish? How do you carry yourself when you walk into a room? What kinds of conversations do you have with your loved ones? What kind of inner peace do you hold even on stressful days? Now, here's the reality. Every year, about 80% of people abandon their New Year's intentions by early February. And that means only about 20% of people follow through long enough to experience real transformation. That's not because the other 80% are lazy or weak or not motivated enough. It's because most of us have never been taught how change actually works in the brain, how habits are formed, how motivation really operates, and how to design our lives so that consistency becomes natural instead of a daily battle of willpower. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're going to talk about why your past attempts to create new habits may have failed, why discipline is not about being tougher, why motivation gets misunderstood, how the brain actually wires habits, and what you must do practically to finally make new habits stick for good. Change doesn't happen from sheer intensity or willpower alone, and it certainly doesn't happen from quick bursts of enthusiasm that fade after a few days of reality hitting. Real change happens when you understand the underlying psychology and neuroscience that drive habits. When you understand that your brain is actually wired to resist repeated effort until it learns that a new behavior is not a threat and then turns it into automatic behavior. And when you build systems that work with your brain's strengths instead of fighting its instinct to conserve energy. To begin, let's talk about how your brain forms habits. Your brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. It's like a manager that is always looking for ways to run the operation with the least cost possible. Once a behavior is repeated often enough, your brain moves it from the conscious effort part, which is your prefrontal cortex, into the automatic behavior part, which is your basal ganglia. Once that happens, the behavior becomes a habit, something you do without thinking about it. That is why brushing your teeth, driving a familiar route, or checking your phone can feel automatic. It's also why bad habits can feel hardwired and hard to break, because they literally have been coded into this automatic part of the brain. But that's not a dead end. It's actually good news. Because the very mechanism that makes a habit automatic is the same mechanism by which a new habit can be formed. The key is repetition over time in a way that your brain begins to associate the new behavior with a reward. And that's where dopamine comes in. Dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical most people think it is. It's the motivation molecule. Dopamine spikes when you anticipate a reward, not when you get one. That's why checking your phone feels addictive. Even though most of what you see doesn't truly make you happier, your brain is motivated by the anticipation of the next hit of information or novelty. That pursuit of novelty creates a dopamine spike that feels good in the moment, yet leaves you craving more. Over time, if your brain is trained to chase quick dopamine hits from phone scrolling or sugar or impulsive behavior, real life can start to feel dull by comparison, and your motivation for long-term goals drops. But here's where the science becomes empowering. Your brain is not fixed. It's plastic. Scientists call this neuroplasticity. Neural pathways can be strengthened or weakened based on patterns of use. That means the habits you've built in the past are not permanent, and the habits you build going forward can become your new default ways of being if you design the loops correctly. Your brain learns through cue, routine, reward loops. A cue is something that triggers your brain to go into automatic mode. The routine is the behavior you want to perform, and the reward is whatever your brain interprets as a positive outcome that tells it, do this again. If you can deliberately shape these three components in your life, you can build new neural pathways that support consistent, healthy habits rather than defaulting to old patterns that don't serve you. But most people don't start there. Most people start with willpower. The idea that if they just try harder, want it more, or can push through a craving, they will finally succeed. But willpower alone is like using muscle strength, where what's actually needed is structural change, and muscles get tired. Motivation gets depleted by stress and decision fatigue. And when life gets chaotic, as it always does, willpower collapses first. Real change happens when you move from trying to do something to becoming the kind of person who naturally does that thing. Identity precedes behavior. For example, saying, I'm the kind of person who moves my body every day because it supports my energy, longevity, and quality of life is far more powerful than saying, I need to work out more. The former shapes how you see yourself. The latter just places pressure on a single behavior. Identity-based habits rewire your subconscious beliefs, and beliefs drive behavior far more reliably than intentions ever do. This is why someone who labels themselves as a healthy eater will automatically make different food choices than someone who labels themselves as someone trying to eat healthier. The identity becomes the lens through which decisions are made moment by moment, and that is what drives consistency over time. This also explains why extrinsic motivation, doing things for external rewards, approval, or fear of consequences, rarely sustains long-term change. If the only reason you want to lose weight is to look good in a swimsuit or to avoid shame or judgment, the motivation will likely fade when the initial excitement wears off or when stress hits. Intrinsic motivation, doing things because they are aligned with your deepest values and because the long-term payoff feels meaningful, is what sustains action even when motivation dips. So if your goal is to improve your health so that you can have more energy to show up for your relationships, to be present for your work, to feel strong and capable in your body, that deeper why becomes the anchor that keeps you moving forward when the first flush of enthusiasm wears off. This is why, in a moment, we are going to talk about how to identify your intrinsic why, the reason that means more to you than anything else, and how to tie your new habits to that reason. But before we get there, let's get more practical about how to design your environment so that your brain is more likely to succeed. Because intentions alone are not enough. Environment shapes behavior. If your environment is filled with cues that support your old habits, your brain will default to the familiar pathways. But if you consciously design your physical and digital environment to support your new behaviors, you make the new habit easier to do, and that increases the likelihood of repetition until the habit becomes automatic. For example, if you want to drink more water, put a large water bottle where you see it all day long. If you want to read more books, instead of scrolling your phone before bed, put the book on your pillow so that it's the first thing you see at night. If you want to eat more vegetables, make sure they are washed, cut, and visible in your fridge instead of buried behind processed foods. That's not a trivial detail. That's habit design. Another essential strategy is to layer your new habits onto existing routines so your brain recognizes the cue more clearly. If you already make coffee every morning, use that moment as the cue to journal for 5 minutes, or to take your supplements, or to take a short walk. The key is making the behavior so easy to start that your brain doesn't even debate it. Tiny, non-threatening actions repeated consistently build neural pathways rapidly. In fact, research shows that it takes an average of about 66 days of consistent repetition for a new behavior to become automatic. And some habits take even longer, which is why consistency over time matters far more than bursting out of the gate with unrealistic goals. This is also why celebrating small wins matters. Your brain learns through reward signals, dopamine spikes, and most people misunderstand what counts as a reward. The reward doesn't have to be indulgent or large. The reward can simply be the satisfaction of checking off the behavior, the sense of accomplishment, the positive self-talk that says, I showed up again. Those internal rewards reinforce the habit more deeply than any external validation ever will. Rewards are how your brain learns that the new routine is worth. Repeating and the anticipation of the reward is what releases dopamine. So if you can celebrate each small win, your brain will begin to crave the new behavior rather than the old one. But we also have to talk about removing friction from the habits you want to build and adding friction to the habits you want to reduce. Friction is anything in the environment that makes a behavior easier or harder to do. If your phone notifications constantly pull your attention, turn them off or remove the apps from your home screen. If unhealthy snacks are easy to reach, put them out of sight or get them out of the house entirely. If you dread the thought of exercise because it requires too much effort to start, lay out your workout clothes the night before, have your shoes by the door, and choose a short, manageable routine you can do immediately when you wake up. That simple reduction in startup energy nearly doubles compliance because your brain sees the behavior as less threatening and more accessible. In contrast, adding friction, such as requiring a passcode to access social media or putting your phone in another room during focused work time, cuts down usage dramatically because your brain prefers the path of least resistance. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, puts it simply, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. That means it's not the goal itself that determines success, it's the daily environment and routines that either support or sabotage the behavior. So let's bring this back to you and what you can do right now to make real change happen this year. Step 1 is to define with clarity the version of you want 6 months from now. Write it down in vivid detail, not vague wishes, but specific outcomes. What time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed? What do you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? How often do you move your body? How do you manage stress when it shows up? How do you show up for the people you love? How do you speak to yourself? How do you feel about your body and your life? The clearer the vision, the stronger the pull toward that future self. Step 2 is to identify your deep why. This is about purpose, the reason that matters so much to you that it keeps you showing up even when motivation dips. Ask yourself, why do you want this change? Not just the surface answer, but the next layer down. For example, if you want to lose weight, is it really about the number on the scale? Or is it about having energy to keep up with your kids? Or feeling confident in your own skin so that you don't hold back in relationships? Or living long enough and healthy enough to see grandchildren graduate? Value-driven motivation lasts far longer than superficial motivation. Step 3 is to choose just one habit to start with, not 10. 1. Focus creates results. Choose a habit that is aligned with your vision and your why, and then define the cue, the action, and the reward. Make the cue visible, make the action easy to start, and define an immediate reward that feels satisfying. Then, design your environment to support that behavior by reducing friction to the new habit and increasing friction to the old habit you want to replace. For example, if you want to walk after dinner, decide in advance where you will walk, what shoes you will wear, and who, if anyone, you might invite to join you so that the cue, dinner ending, reliably triggers the action. Track it daily so you can see your progress. Step 4 is to celebrate small wins. Recognize each time you follow through. Celebrate the act of showing up. Notice how your energy feels. Notice the confidence you gain. Those internal rewards create dopamine spikes that reinforce the habit loop more than any external accolade ever could. Step 5 is to build support around you. Change doesn't happen in isolation. Psychologists have found that accountability increases success rates dramatically. When you have someone to check in with, a friend, a partner, a coach, a community, your likelihood of following through increases significantly because we are social creatures whose behaviors are shaped by the norms and expectations of our social circles. So find that accountability partner, that community that supports your vision, that group that reflects the kind of people you want to become. Step 6 is to be patient and consistent. Remember that habits take time to form. There will be days when motivation dips. There will be setbacks. But consistency over time, not perfection in the moment, is what builds lasting change. When you start to feel discouraged, remind yourself of your vision, revisit your why, simplify the behavior if needed so that you can win small victories and keep moving forward. And whenever you feel yourself slipping into old patterns, remember this: you are not stuck. Your brain can change. Your habits can change. Your life can change. The future you is already possible. It just needs your consistent action to become your present reality. So start today. Define your vision, clarify your why, choose one habit, design your environment, track your progress, celebrate your wins, build your community, and above all, be kind to yourself as you grow. This year can be the year you finally follow through. You can be part of the 20% who experience transformation because you understand how change actually works and you apply it intentionally every day. You're becoming that future version of you right now with every choice you make, and I'm cheering you on every step of the way.